welcome to Wrestling at Random. I'm Jeremy Deemer.
And I am Adam Summers.
And this is the podcast where every week we dump all the internet's wrestling content into the randomizer. We fire it up, it selects a show for us to watch at random, and it randomly took us back to Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling, which we've done a show if you go back to Season 2 of the archives. We've done a Mid-Atlantic show. We're going back for another episode, this time May 25th, 1985, or Season 13, Episode 21, if you're listening on or watching the episode on Peacock.
Hey, if this podcast is up on Peacock by the time people are listening to this, we've been making moves. But yes, Mid-Atlantic, 1985, May of 1985, just after my 4th birthday. And Mid-Atlantic, we talked about it a little bit before in the previous episode in Season 2, where we did a Mid-Atlantic TV episode, that it's strange because I grew up watching, as we've talked about before, Mid-South and World Class. And then when I moved back to the Chicago area as a young child right around this time, I grew up watching the NWA, but we didn't get Mid-Atlantic here. We just, you had access to TBS. So you saw World Championship Wrestling, Jim Crockett Promotions on Saturday night. And so Mid-Atlantic TV was always like, I never really saw it until I was older, but it feels so familiar because it's all the guys I saw on TBS and it's announcers that you were, by and large familiar with. So as I got older, it was fun to go back and see Mid-Atlantic, and here for this podcast, obviously see it a couple of times.
Yeah, let's take you back. If you haven't listened to the previous Mid-Atlantic podcast, first of all, shame on you. Go listen to it right now. Ron Bass and Black Bart went to Ricky Steamboat's gym. Go listen to that episode.
What an event that was. What a happening that was. That was honestly one of my favorite things we ever reviewed on this podcast, any season, any episode.
Yeah, super fun. Go listen to that. And here's how that episode starts with a little intro in history about Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling. A little bit about Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling from Dick Bourne and David Chappelle. By January 1974, Jim Crockett Promotions, now led by Jim Crockett Jr., had effectively switched all references to the promotion to be the name Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling. The main television show now bore that name, as opposed to its earlier designations as either All-Star Wrestling or Championship Wrestling.
Because there weren't enough territories using All-Star Wrestling, as we've learned on this podcast in this season.
Also significant is that the promotion's regional titles were renamed the Mid-Atlantic Heavyweight and Mid-Atlantic Tag Team Championships during the last months of 1973 from their previous designations of Eastern Heavyweight and Atlantic Coast Tag Team, respectively. In December of 1986, the Mid-Atlantic Heavyweight title was vacated for good, and the television show that was Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling would be renamed NWA Pro Wrestling. Jim Crockett Promotions at that point had begun expanding nationally to compete with Vince McMahon and the World Wrestling Federation, and there was no longer a regional component or reference to the Mid-Atlantic area. So 2 years before the territory was brought into just the national promotion. So this show opens with an in-progress clip of Tully Blanchard, Don Carnoodle, and he's coming off the top, and we pause mid-action, and we cut away to Mid-Atlantic funky music. Love it.
Yes, we had screaming fans as we cut away to the intro. That was sort of the format for the episode. Each week they'd show a little clip, not show you the big thing, and then take you to the intro. We come back and it's Bob Caudle, a voice that I love, one of my all-time favorite announcers as a child and here as an adult, and Johnny Weaver, and we see in the ring it's the Nature Boy, not Ric Flair. It's Buddy Landel himself, managed by J.J. Dillon. I had forgotten about that the future manager of the Horsemen, in very, very short order, the manager of the Horsemen, J.J. Dillon, was here managing Nature Boy Buddy Landel. He is taking on quite the doughy jobber, Ron or Rob Rossi.
Yeah, Rossi, he's a cool dad bod jobber.
Yeah, he's not quite like body falling out of a singlet in every direction type of jobber, but he's not like some of those guys we saw on recent shows. I think on that primetime show that we reviewed this season, where the jobbers looked like almost borderline stars. And
yeah,
you and I both don't like that.
No, absolutely. We want our jobbers to be untrained. We want them to have ill-fitting gear, and
there's a bar that we don't want them to clear.
Exactly.
And Rossi here seemed to be doing the limbo under that bar quite nicely.
Totally. He's on the high end, but a totally adequate jobber here. Now,
yes.
You mentioned Bob Caudle and Johnny Weaver on commentary. I do want to take a minute to talk about Bob Caudle because, my first introductions to and most of my experience with Bob Caudle is as JR's color man for NWA WCW shows of the late 80s.
Yes.
And he was he was just like a totally fine, but you never really like he's just a familiar voice. He didn't really stand out or anything to me.
He was a comfortable voice that made you. He didn't really make any points that were overly salient, but he also wasn't awful. I mean, the older he got, like any announcer, kind of the fastball slipped a little bit, but he was totally fine. Here, though, on this show in May 1985, he is the guy that is depended upon to hold this entire broadcast together as the actual play-by-play man. Yeah,
moving over from color to play-by-play, he's great. Bob Caudle is a great play-by-play guy. He's describing the action. He's got excitement. And
in spades.
And he does a great job of giving you all of the backstory, catching you up on what's going on, and he's absolutely fantastic. And then he's hosting all of the promo interviews.
He's doing a lot of work here. Yeah, versatile, very busy here on this episode of Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling. It's also quite the contrast if you look at some of the Jim Crockett Promotions World Championship Wrestling TBS shows that we reviewed, particularly the one we reviewed earlier in this season with one David Crockett on the call, who he has the enthusiasm, but as we've talked about before, just the cadence and the pacing of what he says is just so strange. He just says odd things and gets excited at weird times, and it's charming, but it's very unconventional, and it's definitely it's halting, and I could see how it could be off-putting, whereas Bob Caudle is just, on top of everything else he said, just the consummate professional broadcaster with the voice and the sense of timing and saying the right things at the right times. But, he's got a little bit of that childlike wonder while watching pro wrestling still, at a somewhat advanced age here, even in 1985. So, yeah, Bob Caudle, great. Johnny Weaver largely exists on this show.
He's just riding the bus. He's not bringing anything overly exciting. He's not offensive. Just
Mark Henry on AEW, like in that you almost don't notice that he's there because he says so little, which is fine. And we've heard far worse.
Yeah, well, just as long as you're not detracting, then I'm fine with Johnny.
Particularly
Weaver.
When you've got sort of prime or near prime Bob Caudle guiding us through. So Johnny Weaver does get me very angry, though, very early on here as this Buddy Landel, Ron Rossi battle is about to take place. And Johnny Weaver says that we have a world title match coming up here on this episode of Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling. I am excited. I'm thinking we're going to see Ric Flair. We're going to see Dusty Rhodes. And then the next words that he says, 2 words, 1 name, Denny Brown. And he says Denny Brown will be taking on Patrick Tanaka. I perk up a little bit. And it is for the NWA Junior Heavyweight Championship of the world.
The World Junior Heavyweight Championship. So there's your world title. Yeah, we'll get there. But now
that's like calling Tommy Rich versus Firebreaker Chip a main event anywhere in the world in 1991. Where the words world title are doing a lot of work here, unfortunately.
In the ring, we're watching Buddy Landel beat this guy up. we're told, we're reminded that Ric Flair is the world's heavyweight champion, but Buddy Landel says that he's the real Nature Boy.
Yes, he says he should be the world champion, that he's the not only real, but the original Nature Boy. And this is, as much as I groaned early on, like this is pre all of Buddy Landel's problems really taking hold. He was pretty damn good still in 1985. He's obviously not Ric Flair, but he was very good. And you could see how he could find his way, particularly with the J.J. Dillon manager situation, into some fairly high profile situations.
Yeah, he's working an arm and then body slam and an awesome, like, high leaping elbow drop.
Yes, it's the corkscrew elbow drop, he used to always call it.
Corkscrew elbow drop. He nailed it perfectly, and Landel then puts on the figure 4, but he does it without the spinning toe hold.
Yes.
I got Hulk Hogan putting on the figure 4 vibes here.
He just stepped into it, dropped back. J.J. Dillon, we should mention, is great during this match. When Buddy Landel has the arm bar on Ron Rossi, we see this great shot from behind J.J. Dillon, like over his shoulder, and J.J. is yelling to stretch him. And then after the figure 4, after the match is over, Landel still has the figure 4, and we get that great spot where J.J. Dillon, the manager, comes in to separate, to end the hold because it's just in too deep. Buddy Landel cannot let go of the maneuver himself.
And then we get fans of that here on this podcast. Love that.
Absolutely. We get a replay of that corkscrew elbow drop then. And just like you said, he gets a ton of height, and it's as if he's starting almost like a leaping standing leg drop and transitions it to an elbow drop. It's very different. It's one of those things I'm surprised somebody hasn't brought back. It's not quite the power drive / flashing elbow of the Great Muta, but it's, as far as elbow drops go, one of the best you're ever going to find.
Bob Caudle interviews Dusty Rhodes, and
talk about comfort food for me, that sentence.
Absolutely. And Dusty tells you that he's the biggest box office attraction. He runs down his resume.
He says he can't be dictated to. He's complaining that Tully was talking to Bob Geigel and Jim Crockett, politicking when Dusty walked in. He says he doesn't have to go to Geigel or Crockett. You should just come to me. You can't think for yourself, but I'm not hard to find.
Yeah, Tully is the NWA television champion, and he wants Dusty Rhodes to have to work his way back up, starting at the bottom, if he wants a shot at Tully Blanchard and the TV title.
Yes, he then ends the promo by once again threatening Bob Geigel to stay out of his business.
Bob Geigel being the president of the NWA at this point.
Yes, a powerful man to say the least at this point. We then get a graphic that says, Paul Jones says the Boogie Woogie Man has declared war on him. And I just write, oh no. These are not two of my favorite men. Paul Jones, we've talked about it all the way going back to season 1. I think one of the worst managers I've ever seen in a major promotion. And on top of everything else about Jimmy Valent, I'm still trying to process the squashing of the Road Warriors by Jimmy Valent and Bez Whatley several seasons ago here on this podcast. But that's what takes us to commercial. We come back, and it is another one for the ages. This almost feels like it would be at home on an episode of Prime Time, showing us like the opening match from Madison Square Garden, as it's Cowboy, not yet outlaw, Ron Bass, fresh from a tour of Japan, taking on Sam Houston.
Also managed by J.J. Dillon as Ron Bass here at this point.
Quite the stable. Ron Bass and Buddy Landel. He would upgrade himself to the Horsemen.
Yeah, I was going to say the natural pairing there. You've got, Ron Bass and Sam Houston, I feel like, was on every episode of Primetime Wrestling. That was every house show opener.
Yes, or depending on what the city it was, that might have been the main event.
Yes.
Yeah, like you had a Hogan and Earthquake in one city, and then you had like Tito Santana and IRS in another city, and then you had like in Hammond, Indiana, it was Ron Bass versus Sam Houston main eventing.
So we're told that Avalanche Buzz Tyler is your Mid-Atlantic champion.
This guy again. Talk about someone I had forgotten about.
Yeah, I did not realize he had a run as Mid-Atlantic champion here. He does an inset promo, which was not very good.
No, and it's one of those, we've talked about before, NWA territories that have, the world champion was more often than not Ric Flair, and he would come in from time to time and defend the title, but then you had your territory champion, whatever the top belt was in the territory, the Florida champion or whatever it was here, the Mid-Atlantic title. And this is more, as I say often, this is more Western States heritage than like anything else. If Buzz Tyler is the champion, and you had other championships obviously on the show. The U.S. title we'll see.
Sure, we'll have we have real championships later, but yeah, this title is being fought over by Ron Bass and Buzz Tyler. So that tells you where the Mid-Atlantic Championship is.
And by the way, if you're wondering if Buzz Tyler is Buzz Sawyer,
no,
it is not. And there is
Definitely
a drop
not.
off in every conceivable way.
What do you think of the Mid-Atlantic Championship belt?
I wasn't overly impressed.
It's a weird looking belt.
It's a weird looking belt. And was that the title where we had that, or maybe it was the World Junior title? There's one where
the junior title, they give you the close up.
Yeah, we'll get to that later. Yeah. One of the strangest ring introductions on any televised wrestling show I've ever seen. But yeah, I was not particularly blown away by this belt. I saw this and I didn't think you're going to be going to conventions with thousands of dollars threatening to buy it from whoever.
No, and we'll talk about the TV title later on in this episode.
Will we ever?
So Bass now has a glove on, and he does a claw hold, apparently. He learned this in Japan.
He could have just as easily done a tour of World Class and
sure.
This from the Von Erichs. He could have been Ron Von Erich.
Sam Houston with a few drop kicks, and the girls are screaming for Sam Houston.
Yes, that was what I noted as well. These leapfrog drop kicks. The fans are going crazy. We should mention this is not in a studio. This
Correct.
is in a high school gym, a civic center, whatever it is. It's packed. These people are going crazy, and it's instantaneously. We talked about it on that other episode in season 2. It instantaneously gives this a different feel from your other territory era weekly television shows. And kind of similar to what we've talked about worldwide, once we got into the late, mid to late 80s as well, had that same sort of arena vibe, which definitely gives it a different feel.
Yeah, to me, this is a major league feel compared to the regular studio wrestling that was popular amongst the other territories. It
makes it feel hot in some ways.
Does.
Again, different, but like the Sportatorium in Dallas, where that never felt like a studio. I mean, obviously, it was a uniquely configured building, but it felt like a happening. Whereas the studio wrestling, it has a ton of charm, and I love it. But you don't feel like you're watching a wrestling event that's being televised. You feel like you're watching a television show about wrestling.
Bass rams Houston to the buckles, running power slam by Bass, and he gets the 3 count.
I expected Sam Houston to get a little bit more offense. I guess that would come a little bit later. Sam Houston, we talked about before, Kendall Windham having the sheet of paper build, in that if he turned to the side, you would not know he was there. Sam Houston, same thing, very, very skinny guy, but clearly had a connection with the crowd. There's one spot where he hilariously runs into the waiting boot of Ron Bass, who's in the corner, but Bass gets his boot up, and then Sam Houston puts his head down and just runs top of head first into the boot. I've never quite seen that before. The other note that I have here on this match is that Ron Bass in 1985 somehow looks even older than he would in the late 80s, early 90s in the WWF. I don't understand.
After the bell, Bass puts the claw hold on. So he's got the claw on, and J.J. Dillon is holding the ref, pinning him in the corner in hilarious fashion.
That's hilarious, but you're not giving the best part of this. So the claw happens, the crowd is screaming, and as you said, JJ's holding the ref back. Then Avalanche Buzz Tyler comes in, and then we get a running high knee from J.J. Dillon.
Yes, so Tyler hits the ring, and he hits JJ. He goes after Bass. Dillon with a high knee to the back.
A perfect, he runs. If you cut the ring diagonally, he runs from one corner to the other and hits a great high knee. This was athletic stuff here from JJ Dillon, who, as we've talked about, looks just as old here as he would on Nitro some 12 years later.
Yes, he JJ Dillon, the namesake of JJ Dillon syndrome, where you just always look old no matter how young you actually are. JJ then with a finger to the eye, and Bass puts the claw on Tyler. JJ and Bass steal that Mid-Atlantic title belt and escape back to the back.
These fans are absolutely incensed that Ron Bass took the belt. It is something to watch, like a crowd react to Ron Bass this way. Like, you would think he was the greatest heel of all time if you just heard the crowd reaction. You would think this was them stealing the NWA World Heavyweight title from Dusty Rhodes, not stealing the Mid-Atlantic Championship from Buzz Tyler.
One of Paul Jones' merciless mercenaries on next is what we're told. After commercial, U.S. champion Magnum Ta is out to do an interview.
He looks angry. He says Tully has made it a personal issue with him, and we go to the tape.
Yeah, he shows the Kernoodle winning against Tully via DQ. He's beating him up after the match, and then Magnum Ta makes the save. Tully then sucker punches Magnum while he's arguing with Baby Doll, who's getting in his way. Tully then beats Magnum down until Dusty Rhodes makes the save.
The best part about this, the most pro wrestling thing about this, is that in the middle of this intense fist fight, and this isn't a match, this is a post-match brawl. In the middle of this intense fist fight, Tully grabs a hold and hits the slingshot suplex and then goes back to the punches until Dusty makes the save. I loved it. It's wrestling. It wouldn't make sense in anything in the world, but here it made me laugh. Magnum TA, we go back to the interview, and he says, forget about the U.S. title. Let's do this for your TV title that you stole in the first place. Let's do this one-on-one, no interference.
The Raging Bull, Manny Fernandez, takes on Ben Alexander.
Oh my God, Ben Alexander. A very hairy man with an amazing skullet. This is exactly
my kind of jobber. Yeah.
This is what 1985 served up. We deserved it. We loved it. And we have it here. We learned that Manny Fernandez has been out of the territory for a little while, but he's been teaming with Thunderbolt Patterson against the Andersons. He is back here now in the Mid-Atlantic region.
Yeah, this is a super quick match. Manny wins with a flying tackle.
Yeah, this is weird because it's a 3-point stance into a lariat, and then nobody can figure out that this is a lariat. They're calling it a forearm, they're calling it a shoulder block, they're calling it a tackle. Then we see the replay, and it's clearly a lariat. He gets the win. The crowd goes crazy. Bob Caudle is confused not confused, but he's distracted the entire time because he still cannot believe that Ron Bass stole the Mid-Atlantic Championship. He is distraught.
Magnum's back out.
Yeah, so we're back from this commercial. So just to reiterate how this went, we had Magnum TA promo, which featured a video clip, and then they went back to the promo. We had about a 30-second match with Manny Fernandez. We go to a commercial break and see a really cool 50 years of Jim Crockett Promotions logo graphic. Then we're back, and so is Bob Caudle, and so is Magnum TA at the same broadcast position they were before. This time he has his U.S. title, and he says everyone is welcome to a shot. If you go back 2 minutes prior, he said forget about the U.S. title.
That's right.
So this is there's a lot going on here. I don't quite get.
And there's more to come, if you can believe that.
Oh yes, more to come in this promo because Manny Fernandez shows up.
Okay.
They lock hands. Manny Fernandez.
It's a big handshake. This is a big handshake.
This is a big handshake, both in terms of size of hands and duration of shake. Manny then kisses the hand of Magnum TA. Magnum TA, or the Bull, Manny Fernandez says that the Bull is back. He's more intense, and he's ready to make people pay their dues. You're going to serve somebody, daddy. And then he says, direct quote, I'm strung out on you beautiful people. You are my habit. When people show wrestling from the 80s and say the phrase cocaine is a hell of a drug, I'm sorry, I'm not making any accusations. I've met Manny Fernandez. I enjoyed watching him wrestle all ego Ethan Page at a Black Label Pro show a couple years ago. But man, Manny Fernandez was as 80s as it got here. This was something else.
You want to talk about guys who are a terrible promo and are just like this is a terrible promo because he is tripping over his words. He cannot.
He's tripping over his brain. It's not that he just can't. It's twofold. He can't say the things that he's trying to say, but then he can't form the thoughts that would make what he's trying to say make sense. And to see both of those things happening at the same time, with this also like crazed intensity, it's unique. I'll say that.
No, I guarantee that in his head, the promo he heard was awesome.
In his head, he couldn't get a Randy Savage promo.
Yes, he couldn't get it from his head to his lips out into the world. He couldn't do it. And it was. He says he's back. He's more intense and hungry. And then you said about paying his dues. He says, "quote He wants someone to give up payment and dues."
Yes, and then he's screaming about you're going to serve somebody, daddy. And then, like I said, the strung out line. He also has that thing where when he cuts a promo, he cannot let himself take a breath. He is just going to keep talking until the thing that he means to say comes out of his mouth, or the interviewer pulls the microphone away. And this is not the only time we will see him today either in promo.
Tully Blanchard, Baby Doll, and Paul Jones are out for an interview.
This is very frustrating because I'm so excited to see Tully. And then Paul Jones is here in the Seinfeld puffy shirt. Tully is maybe my favorite line on this whole show, where he's talking about Paul Jones' group, and he says, quote, Paul has a stable maybe beyond compare. We talk about words doing a lot of work. Maybe is doing the heavy lifting here. Oh man, I laughed.
So, yeah, the gist is Tully wants to borrow. He wants to hire one of Paul Jones's men because of Dusty Rhodes.
Paul calls the Star Maker. I don't ever remember that being Dusty Rhodes' gimmick. But then we get a clip, and who do we hear on the call? We hear David Crockett. We're seeing footage from TBS. It's the Boogie Woogie Man, Jimmy Valiant, choking Paul Valiant. And here comes Abdullah the Butcher.
Yeah, so Paul Jones shows a clip of Abdullah the Butcher attacking Jimmy Valiant to save Paul Jones.
In his injured throat. Apparently, Boogie Woogie Man had an injured throat.
So Tully says, this is great. And so he purchases the services of Abdullah the Butcher to go after Dusty Rhodes. And I want to see that fat man battle. That sounds awesome.
Yes, I am definitely ready for that. What I was not ready for, though, we come back from commercial. And we have
Before we move away from Abdullah the Butcher, we've reviewed a lot of Abdullah the Butcher matches in the free feed and the Patreon,
including All Japan from this time
for his All Japan. Wild. Yes,
it's wild then to see him here in the U.S. and he's moving when he hits that elbow drop.
Yeah, and if you want to hear an interesting Ed Whalen Abdullah the Butcher story, subscribe to the Patreon. This week's Patreon episode, we tell that story. More Abdullah the Butcher content over in the Patreon feed.
If you can't get enough from the bad man from Sudan, you can get it over on the Patreon feed. We then go talk about a jump cut of sorts. We go from Abdullah the Butcher to an extreme close-up of the extremely lame NWA World Junior Heavyweight title belt. This introduction is honestly one of the strangest things I've ever seen on a televised professional wrestling show. We don't have in-arena ring announcing. Both Denny Brown first and then Pat Tanaka just stand in the ring awkwardly looking at the camera for what feels like a decade as Bob Caudle says on commentary, but not over any house mic, who each man is.
So this close-up on this title belt
This is not the gift for the show this week. As much as I
no, it should not be. It can't be because it's that boring.
Want people to listen.
Yes, it's that hideous. Go Google yourself some NWA World Junior Championship. This thing is a snooze fest. Like, this is a no design title. It is like a flat piece of gold that just says like NWA World Junior Champion. It's like there's no engraving, there's no pictures, there's no nothing. No. This is the most snooze fest of a belt I've ever seen.
No, this is like if you got a catalog from the belt maker and it just showed you what the starting point was to then begin designing your belt. That's what this championship is. It's the belt version of a create a wrestler in a video game that you have not actually given any attributes yet. It is just, as you would say about wrestlers, a complete zero of a championship belt.
And it's on a zero of a man in the champion, Denny Brown.
Denny Brown, who my recollection of is from a few years later when he was a NWA/WCW jobber after they got rid of the junior heavyweight division. Instead, it is Denny Brown here as the junior heavyweight champion. He is, if you saw him, you would think there's no way this guy's a champion. He looks every bit the jobber as the other guys that we see losing matches here on this show. Is a terrible haircut. He's tall, not a particularly great body. Like he's perfectly fine in the ring at points, but he's not spectacular. But I am excited to see that his opponent is a very young Patrick Tanaka.
Tanaka, very young. You mentioned he is 21 years old here. Patrick Tanaka.
Also, what I found amusing here is that the kayfabed weight class, the weight limit in the junior heavyweight division was 235 pounds, which I don't know that there's anybody on modern wrestling television outside of like 2 or 3 people that would actually be over 235 pounds. But that's the limit. And then Johnny Weaver, this is, I think, the actual only note I have about Johnny Weaver's commentary on this entire program. This made me laugh. He says, both men are respectably close to the weight limit.
So
we should note Fashion Corner, by the way. Denny Brown, just short trunks, just total nothing look. Pat Tanaka has no shoes on. He is barefoot here in this match.
As he would be years later, and as competing as part of the Orient Express in the World Wrestling Federation.
Still, I always say
Bad Company.
Both times with Paul Diamond. But always say, if you want to go back and watch a great Pat Tanaka match, go back and watch from Royal Rumble 91, maybe the greatest pay-per-view opening match of all time, at least of that era for sure, as it was the Orient Express, Pat Tanaka and Paul Diamond as Kato taking on the Rockers.
Yeah, excellent match. And this was a pretty good match here as well. So they trade arm drags, some arm ringers, a headlock by Brown. Tanaka with a shoulder block, a backdrop attempt by Brown, but Tanaka flips over, does a cool flip, lands on his feet, and hits a kick to the head.
Yeah, that was a great spot, particularly for 1985 U.S. weekly television wrestling. That backdrop counter from Pat Tanaka was great. We get a lockup. They're back into the ropes. Denny does not break clean. He hits a forearm off the break and knocks Pat Tanaka all the way through the ropes to the floor. The thing I noted as this match went along is that Denny Brown is like Gino Hernandez if Gino Hernandez had negative charisma. That's basically the look.
That is, yes.
The haircut, the whole thing. Like,
no charisma, though.
Gino Hernandez having just every ounce of charisma sucked out of him. That would be Denny Brown here.
He brings Tanaka back in over the top. Brown works him over with unimpressive offense.
Yeah, that's definitely a good way to describe it. Unimpressive offense. We do quickly, though, up the ante, though, as Pat Tanaka flips out of a back suplex attempt and hits a beautiful German suplex for a 2 count.
Yeah, German with the bridge for a 2. Tanaka with some offense. He misses a drop kick. Brown grabs a chin lock to get them back on the same page as they had some miscommunications here.
Yes. Yeah, Denny Brown was a perfectly acceptable pro. And that was an example, like you described, of him kind of getting things back on the rails. But the idea that he's the world junior heavyweight champion of the entire National Wrestling Alliance is kind of scary.
Absurd. Yeah. Tanaka fights out, but Brown with a back elbow runs at Tanaka, who drops down, and Brown tumbles through the ropes to the floor. Back inside, Brown with a roll-up. He tries to hold the rope on the pin, but Tanaka keeps getting his shoulder up at 2. The referee, he can't keep both shoulders. Brown can't keep both of Tanaka's shoulders down while trying to grab that rope.
It was clear that this was supposed to be the finish. Denny Brown, he hits a roll-up. As you said, he's holding on to the ropes, but as he's holding on to the ropes, he's not able to have enough leverage to hold Pat Tanaka down. Tanaka is not trying to get his shoulder up, but it's just up. Just what they're doing in the positions each of their bodies are in, it keeps screwing up the pin, so it keeps not being a 3 count. Denny then just hits an elbow drop and then goes back and gets a pin in the middle of the ring, but grabs the tights and gets the win. Because clearly the story of this match, what they wanted to have it be at the end of this was, hey, Denny Brown's a little bit of a heel, but he's not a competent enough heel, I guess, to be able to pull it off the first, second, third, or fourth time. But finally got it on the 5th attempt.
Denny Brown, still the champ. That was your world title match. That was the world title match you were excited about. Thanks, Johnny Weaver.
Not thrilled about that being the world title match we got. Not thrilled that Denny Brown retained.
No.
I don't see a lot of highly competitive, exciting matches in Denny Brown's future. That said, not too long after this, the Ninja, the future Great Muta, will be the NWA World Junior Heavyweight Champion. We covered that earlier this season, I believe, or was that over on the Patreon feed? I can't remember which.
Battle of the Belts
1986 Battle of the Belts show,
yeah. So we come back. Ivan Koloff is out for an interview with Bob Caudle. He explains that Russia has chosen Nikita Koloff to be the champion.
I love this. That the country of Russia, the government, the Kremlin, has decided that Nikita Koloff will be the world heavyweight champion of professional wrestling. I always love these storylines where heads of state thought wrestling was so important that they needed to influence the outcomes. As a kid, that amused me greatly. The thing that's most notable about this is that, my God, the forehead of Ivan Koloff, he's wearing a USSR headband that's partially covering up his forehead, and still there are so many deep groove marks from blading, and then several fresh, nearly still bleeding groove marks from, I'm guessing, the shows that had just happened that weekend. That is terrifying. What comes next is legitimately even more terrifying. I thought this was one of the best sort of like tough guy vignettes that just makes you terrified of what this guy is going to do against his opponent. We're in some dungeon, and it's Ivan Koloff holding a heavy bag for Nikita Koloff. There's a picture of Ric Flair taped to the heavy bag, and Nikita Koloff is hitting his clothesline, his Russian sickle, over and over and over and over again on this heavy bag as the picture slowly just shreds and disintegrates, and Ivan Koloff is screaming in the background. I am 40 years old, and I was watching this legitimately terrified like I was a 5-year-old child all over again.
I loved everything about this. I wanted to see nothing more than Nikita Koloff versus Ric Flair. I wanted nothing more than Ivan Koloff to be my personal trainer at the gym.
Yes. I wanted Ivan Koloff to help me against bullies as a child. Like when I saw this, like that might be the one way I could fight back if he was training me.
Yeah, so he's screaming. Nikita's just going nuts, and we'll get to the intensity of Nikita Koloff here in a minute, but what a presence from Nikita Koloff here at this point in time in 1985. Just
my hottest take in general, I think, if anything we've talked about on this podcast, is that for what professional wrestling was supposed to be in 1985, and for what the goal of like American style professional wrestling was, Nikita Koloff at his peak was a freaking fantastic professional wrestler.
So
and
good.
That, I don't mean he was a man of 1,000 holds like Dean Malenko, but for what he was perfect.
He was Goldberg of this era.
a heel, terrifying Russian Goldberg in the mid 80s. There is not a human being that could have been Nikita Koloff better than the man that played the character of Nikita Koloff actually was. Like, just unbelievable. I feel like it's one of those guys that if you're a modern day, like, even if you're not a foreign heel, but just a big monster heel, go back and study Nikita Koloff.
Yeah, I mean, being the foreign heel, the Russian in '85 is, you know, an extra layer of heat, but
Yes.
but man, he's the star filling this out, and it's none more apparent than when you see the world's 6-man tag team champions in the
We've
ring.
talked about a lot on this podcast, the prestige or lack thereof, depending on who had the belts at certain times at those championships. As you said, it's always shocking when it's not Dusty and two random other guys.
Yes, that's what it usually is. Usually you forget about it. We haven't heard about the titles, and then Dusty's near two other guys, and we're told they're the 6-man tag team champions.
Like, I feel like the last 6-man tag champs might have been like Dusty Rhodes, Ranger Ross, and Jumpin' Joey Maggs. I don't think so, but I also am convinced that was the case.
Here it's Ivan Koloff, Nikita Koloff, and Crusher Khrushchev. They are the Russians, and they're going to have a tag team match. So 2 of the 3 are competing. It's Nikita Koloff teaming with Crusher Khrushchev as Uncle Ivan is on the outside. And Khrushchev is the future Smash of Demolition, the future Repo Man.
The future hole-in-one Barry Darso.
That's right. So he's a big dude, but he's more doughy than cut. You know, he's a big guy. Nikita is all muscles and giant traps. And
they're in similar. They're similar height. They're in reasonably similar shape, but Nikita is hairy and like solid, whereas Crusher Khrushchev is not hairy at all. He is smooth and he is not quite as solid. To your point earlier, Nikita Koloff, if he was not Russian, if he was Nick Kaczynski and he did everything that Nikita Koloff did, move the way he did, threw his clothesline the way he did, yelled, he would still have been
huge star.
Just as terrifying, would have been a star. Crusher Khrushchev, if he was not a Russian here, he would have been an absolute zero as far as a guy that would have been like a high-end heel. And like you said earlier, seeing these two men next to each other, you see that one man needed the gimmick desperately and one did not at all. It was just something that put it even more over the top.
And that was exactly my point, is that while having that extra layer of being the foreign Russian nemesis, that does not make a good heel, and that does not make a star. Nikita Koloff, we've talked about guys in color while everyone else is in black and white, popping out of the screen. That's this guy in this match. You're like, wow, that guy is he's gonna go after Ric Flair for the World's Heavyweight Championship, and I need to see that match.
Yeah, absolutely. This is going to be maybe the strangest analogy I've ever made here on this podcast, but when I see Nikita Koloff and I see Crusher Khrushchev, like, Crusher Khrushchev is my cat before she eats. Like, she kind of moves around slowly. There's nothing really remarkable about the way she moves. After she eats, like, everything is like these sharp movements. She'll hear a sound in her head, will snap to the side. She'll run and then stop. And everything is like, just looks crazy. That's Nikita Koloff. Like, he has such a unique way of moving, and it's so much more pronounced when you see it next to a Crusher Khrushchev, who is just a guy. Not bad, but just a guy.
But you see it, you know, Nikita's in at the beginning of this match for a brief period, then tags in Crusher Khrushchev. And the first thing you notice is, this is a much less intense version of Nikita Koloff. Yes. This guy, you're spoiled by the intensity of Nikita, and all you want is Nikita to get back in. You're like, come on, tag already.
And all you want to do is see Nikita just do the basic things he does with knees up against the ropes, a hard back elbow off an Irish whip. I will note, if we do a little bit of a fashion corner here, I was wondering if this would be something that would upset you. It's not that you necessarily had the exact same gear from the two teams. We have Gene Ligon and Stony Burke are the opposition this week for the Russians. And Stony Burke is wearing red, the same shade of red that the Russians wear. Like, do we have a traitor in our midst? I'm just shocked that he was wearing red here.
I'm glad you mentioned it. It is in my notes that, yes, you're up against the Russians tonight. Wear any other gear but red. You do not.
And it's not as if this was very dramatic or outlandish gear. Like, it was just trunks. You could borrow someone else's trunks for this match. You're going to be in for 72 seconds and get squashed.
Yeah, just don't bring your red gear. Don't have red gear if you're not Russian. So Khrushchev drops Stoney throat first across the top, then sends him into the ropes. Nikita comes in. He's going to hit the sickle here, but Burke just stumbles and falls into the middle rope. He's lucky he didn't break his neck or kill himself the way he fell on that rope there.
Yeah, that's exactly my notes. All caps. Stoney gets whipped to the ropes. Oh my God, he almost dies hooking his neck on the ropes. This was terrifying. We may have found the one thing more terrifying than getting hit by the Russian sickle from Nikita Koloff. It was this near-death experience in the ropes. And that's it. Nikita does hit the sickle after that. The Russians get the win. Gene Ligon, much like Smash of Demolition, Barry Darsow never gets in the ring in this match. I feel like there's some parallels we can draw between this match and the Demolition versus Colossal Connection match from Primetime several episodes ago. And we have the connective tissue of the man behind the paint, or in this case, behind the accent, Barry Darsow.
Tully Blanchard's with Baby Doll, and he's got the beautiful red leather strapped NWA TV title with him. This belt is my favorite. I love everything about it. Glad it was featured prominently on my TV right here.
It is the true perfect 10 in Tully Blanchard's life at this point, and in my life as I see it. If you follow us on Twitter, you have seen the GIF for this week's episode is in fact a little clip from this promo with Tully Blanchard holding that beautiful, as you said, red backed silver belt. A work of art, the height of professional wrestling championships here. Very excited to see a Tully Blanchard promo after some of the we were exposed to the vocal and verbal stylings of Manny Fernandez earlier, so I have hopes that this will be better. Tully talks about how proud he is to be in the NWA and be the TV champion, be the champion worldwide. He talks about Tokyo, Frankfurt, and the Caribbean.
So Tully's a good promo here, especially when, compared to what we've seen so far on the show. Looking at you, Manny Fernandez. But just thinking about a couple years from now, in a couple years as part of the Horsemen, Tully Blanchard's promos are even more next level. Like, he's so good in the 87 time frame, and like 86, 87. Like, so here in 85, he's good, but it's like it even gets more unlocked, and
the delivery
his promo
improved.
goes to the next level. Yeah,
the delivery improves. He doesn't. It's a good promo, but you can see that he'll stumble a few times. He kind of like catches himself and goes in a different direction. Whereas, a few years later, it's sort of all systems go. But basically, he's ready to fight Dusty. He says that Dusty has called him a chicken and a geek. He has the belt and the bank account. So basically, who's the real star? We go from that to another promo, and it is Dusty Rhodes again. He is sweating profusely for some reason.
He's in a button-up shirt, yes. and just there's massive sweat stains under his boobs. Like, it's
on his chest, underarms, even on his belly. It must have been a warm night here in the Mid-Atlantic region. And he is joined by the Boogie Woogie Man, Jimmy Valent, who apparently is ready to time travel a decade later to Monday Night Raw because he has signs.
He brought the signs. He's loved by the people. He says that all these guys want to help him, but no one's better than Dusty Rhodes to be the guy to help him.
He says he's been thinking about Paul Jones, Superstar Billy Graham, the Barbarian, and then he says, direct quote, Bibdullah the Butcher.
He did say that. Boogie So Dusty starts doing another promo, but he gets cut off by the boogeyman.
And then he leaves for a minute. He wanders away and then comes back. This wasn't quite that promo. What was it on that World Championship Wrestling show that we reviewed earlier in this season, where he's just like blocking the camera and someone else is cutting a promo? It's not quite that, but he just disappears.
Yeah, he ends up giving Dusty a hug and a kiss and laying one on Bob Caudle as the segment ends.
There's two fan-made signs. One says, Valiant's War. The other says, We love you, Jimmy. Then Jimmy Valiant screams something about, we gonna jam the box one more time, and then kisses Bob Caudle. So, and this was delightfully strange.
People love Jimmy Valiant, and I don't get it, but they are like out of their minds excited for this Jimmy Valiant-ness.
Every time we see him, I mean, think back to that Boogie Jam show from the Mid-Atlantic region in 1984, where Jimmy Valiant goes on after a Ric Flair versus Ricky Steamboat 16-minute draw world title match. He's the main event, and people are not disappointed. They are going nuts. They're thrilled that that's what's going to send them home. So it is one of those, I guess, you had to be there. I remember as a kid, like thinking he was funny and silly, but like certainly not thinking, oh my God, Jimmy Valiant, that's my guy. He's right there.
No, when he would show up in like Atlanta, right? Like it was a different experience than here in the Mid-Atlantic. Yeah, for sure. Him and Bugsy McGraw would show up, and it's this
or
is different.
Pistol Pez Watley if you need to squash the Road Warriors on a given night.
Tully Blanchard and the Barbarian with Paul Jones.
Not picked by the randomizer, that trio of men. This is not Battle Bowl, but yes, it is Tully Blanchard and the Barbarian, managed by Paul Jones, number one. And they're taking on Hard Rock Rick Reeves and Mark Fleming.
Yes, they are. And so this is the first. So this is Tully teaming with one of Paul Jones's men. He'll eventually team with Abdullah to take on Dusty. So this is a preview of the working relationship between Tully and Paul Jones.
I don't understand how Rick Reeves is called Hard Rock.
Hard Rock, yeah.
What I'm saying, though, is if he's called Hard Rock, how is Mark Fleming not called Brick Wall? It's exactly what he looks like, a human brick wall. He's in there with Tully. Tully's just dancing around, and then out of nowhere hits a great single leg takedown. Like, I feel like in those 3 or 4 moments, you got everything that was great about Tully Blanchard. Not quite as great as on that last episode of Mid-Atlantic that we reviewed last season. If you recall, who was it that was it Tim Horner or Brad Armstrong, somebody that he was defending the TV title against, and they jumped in the ring, and he just casually stepped to the side, Tully did, and whipped the man with the TV title. It was glorious. It was the gift that I put up for that show. It was so good.
The Barbarian is in with Fleming, Mark Fleming, and he beats him down, does like the falling headbutt, which I always love, and then as soon as he gets up, hits him with a back rake.
And a great sell of this back rake by Mark Fleming. This is a very young, very early on in his career Barbarian, but he still is intimidating. And it's fun to see Tully Blanchard with like a big, scary, mean, painted up, tough guy as his muscle.
He hits as Bob Caudle called it, a double thrust.
It was a hard double thrust. Elbow drop. Tully tags in. And we get Hard Rock Rick Reeves in to square off with Tully now.
He does. He hits one hip toss, and Tully's begging off. He's running away.
Crowd's going nuts for this, by the way, as he's begging off. Reeves is in great shape, but he is green as grass.
We then have the Barbarian coming in for a distraction, allowing Tully to throw Reeves outside. The ref is distracted as Paul Jones and the Barbarian lay in shots on the outside.
Inaccurate. Barbarian lays in shots. Paul Jones tries to get a shot in, but he's so bad that he fouls and basically doesn't even hit the man.
So throws him so back inside, and Tully puts on a chin lock solely for the purpose of smiling at the camera, which made me howl with laughter.
Not only smiling at the camera, he hits a body slam, he puts this reverse chin lock on, looks directly into the camera, and yells $1 million smile and then smiles. Oh my God, this was great.
That
Tully
was
Blanchard. Just what
awesome.
a man. What a man.
Barbarian's back in, hits a jumping leg drop, some more headbutts on the mat.
He just throws his man into the corner, just tosses him.
Which is one of our favorite things, is when I'm done beating up this jobber, want to beat up the other jobber. So you throw the guy into his own corner to make the tag.
I particularly like when it's a big, mean, scary guy like Barbarian doing this. Like, it's cool when it's Bobby Eaton, but when it's a big, mean guy like Barbarian, it just adds so much more.
Fleming tags in. He gets a quick flurry of offense, but Barbarian headbutts him, tags Tully back in. Tully hits a suplex. Barbarian tags in, comes off the top rope with the diving headbutt,
which is something to see. A guy the size of the Barbarian hitting a Dynamite Kid style jumping diving headbutt off the top rope. We get a replay and you can really see how remarkable of a move it is. Also, I had no recollection of the crowds during this time period chanting "Weasel" at Paul Jones, but apparently that was a thing in the Mid-Atlantic in 1985.
Magnum Ta is back. If you have, we haven't had enough.
Promo number 3. Not only is Magnum Ta back, but he is joined for the second time by the Raging Bull Manny Fernandez. I like that they have at least switched sides. They're now each standing on the opposite side of Bob Caudle compared to 20 minutes earlier.
Like, we didn't get through the Manny Fernandez promo and say, whew, all right, we don't have to do that again until next week. Nope, bring them back. We're doing it. We're closing the show with Manny Fernandez and Magnum Ta.
Well, the other thing, too, that we should note is that Magnum Ta at this point he's not a great promo. He has great intensity, and he just has such a great look and such natural physical charisma that it carries it through, but he's not a great promo. He sounds like Ric Flair next to Manny Fernandez. I also like the journey that we've gone on, as I mentioned earlier, with the U.S. title. Promo number 1 doesn't care about it at all. Promo number 2 cares about it, all comers. Promo number 3, he says the pressure is on to defend the title, and now he's a little worried about it.
He runs down all of the heels. He says he'll fight them all. And then Manny says that he has his back, but in the most convoluted way possible.
I hope that you play some of this, particularly this Manny Fernandez promo.
We have to. That's the only way.
He says that he is making sense out of his life right now, which I think is false. He says that he wants to be a world champion like he was with Dusty. I assume he's talking about the tag belts. He starts talking about the most prestigious thing in his heart, and he ends the promo hands clasped with Magnum Ta saying, direct quote, "This is maybe the most 80s professional wrestling thing of all time. Togetherness as brothers, brother."
Welcome back. Mighty glad to have Raging Bull.
You know, a lot of things all over the world, like the man's talking about taking care of business. The Bull right now is making sense out of his life. You know, there's a lot of things, a lot of prestige in the world of today. You talk about champions all over the walk of world, but then you talk about world heavyweight champion. You talk about to world tag team champions, and you talk about the Bull have to earn that respect of somebody. Yes, I want to be a world champion. I want to climb that ladder. I want to be up there on the top like I was when I was with Dustin Rhodes. We're world tag team champions, you know, and there's a world television champion, and Tully Blanchard and me, we go way back. But you know something, man? The most prestigious thing to me in my heart is to know that the man that's standing before me is carrying a belt that means something to the whole world, the U.S. title, baby. As long as I'm with it, it's yours, because me and you got a bind that nobody else will ever take, and that's togetherness as brothers, brother.
All right, fans, and we got to go. See you next week. Until then, so long for now.
And that's the end of the show. That's it.
That's the last words that we hear on this program. I hope to God you out there listening got to hear that.
They did, yeah, because we can't describe it. That's literally how the show ends. Now, I'll say this, like, not the best episode of Mid-Atlantic.
No, I enjoyed the one that we watched in season 2 more, particularly
Agreed.
With the all-timer of a segment with Ron Bass and JJ Dillon and Black Bart terrorizing Vic Steamboat in the lobby of Ricky Steamboat's gym. And then a great moment I talked about with Tully Blanchard whipping his opponent casually with the TV title.
This didn't have quite those moments. This was kind of just a show. Too much Magnum and Manny on the promos. You had Dusty there. He never got to do a complete promo.
No, he got to do a half a promo where he was just really mad at Bob Geigel for some reason. And then he got to stand there and wander in and out of frame as Jimmy Valent did Boogie Woogie Man things.
So, yeah, I think, so this was, and not any real huge angles other than Tully forming a working relationship with Paul Jones's what did they call it? His merciless mercenaries.
Merciless mercenaries, or as Magnum Ta said, his stable that is maybe beyond compare.
Favorite thing on the show for you?
Mercenaries that are maybe beyond compare. I like it.
Favorite thing on the show for you?
Oh, the best and worst and favorite thing on the show is all Manny Fernandez.
Yes. I like Manny Fernandez, the wrestler.
Yes.
Terrible promo. Yeah.
Yes, but also but that's the argument for why unscripted promos are great, because you usually either get great promos like, from the likes of Dusty Rhodes or even a Tully Blanchard, or you get what we got here from Manny Fernandez. You don't get a lot of middle ground. You get entertaining either way.
I believe this is Manny Fernandez. 100%. I believe you get him out. You're out at the bar at night with Manny Fernandez, and he's yelling to you across a loud, music's up loud at the bar, and it's crowded, and he's yelling to you. This is what he's yelling to you. Like, I totally believe that.
I could 100% see him in a disco in 1985, grabbing the hand of another patron and yelling, "Togetherness is brothers, brother." 100% buy that. If anything, you always hear about in pro wrestling that the person you see on screen is like the actual human being turned up to 11. I honestly feel like the Manny Fernandez we saw here is the real Manny Fernandez, probably turned down to 7 or 8. As far as other things that I really enjoyed on this show, I would say that probably my actual favorite thing on the show, Bob Caudle for one, but as far as wrestlers, just seeing 1985 Nikita Koloff be 1985 Nikita Koloff made me very happy in the brief windows that we had of that. And then Tully was awesome as usual.
Yeah, the video that went along with Nikita was awesome.
Yes, that's it. That is unquestionably the best thing on this show.
That was great. And honorable mention to rising star Patrick Tanaka. You could tell there was flashes of goodness here, and it was there's a future there. It's coming, and in the ring, the real flashes of awesomeness were him and the Barbarian and Nikita Koloff tonight. Everything else was, steady and rock solid Tully Blanchard, and same thing with Buddy Landell to open the show. So
Buddy Landell, that's a good point. He looked very good as well. Like this felt like a maintenance booking type of show. If anything, this felt like the last show, like the last hour of TV that they got from a set of tapings, and the next week was going to be from the next set of tapings.
Yeah. And so this was, it's always fun to go to Mid-Atlantic. The crowd is amazing. The look and feel is unique. And
the in-arena vibe for a weekly TV show is not overly common during this time period. Yeah,
so if you haven't, go out of your way to see some Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling. And
doesn't have to be this episode, but I would say generally this time period, you really can't go wrong with watching week to week Mid-Atlantic. It's an easy watch. It's a fun watch. But yeah, there wasn't a ton here to really sink your teeth into, I didn't think.
And your partner on your other podcast does a Mid-Atlantic podcast as well. So it's
absolutely
if you get into it,
the Mid-Atlantic Pod. Check out the accompanying Twitter account, which is fantastic as well. Mike Sempervive puts a lot of work into that. It's a labor of love for him, as this podcast is for us. So definitely fill in a lot of the blanks for you over there.
And if you haven't gotten enough podcasts in your life, you can always sign up for our bonus feed. We have an additional show every single week, if you can believe it. And
every Thursday,
a new show hits Currently, it's on Patreon, patreon.com/wrestling at random. Maybe in the future, it's behind some other sort of paywall. And you can also get it if you're like, dude, I do not feel like going and signing up for Patreon. Not happening, but I wish I could access your bonus content. Well, you can directly from your Apple Podcasts app. Hit the subscribe button. It unlocks every single back episode from the bonus feed. So you pay that $5, unlocks the entire back catalog, hours and hours. We're up to 50-some episodes right now.
As we record this, we have 53 full episodes in the bonus content. And it is something else. There's a wide variety. Some of the episodes are very much like the ones you hear on the free feed, full events, full TV shows. Sometimes it's a random match or two. It's stuff that, if you can believe, if you've listened to this podcast for a long time, or let's say you just started listening to us here on the free feed and you're like, man, this is just the name of the podcast certainly is what it is. This is as random as could be. We are even more random on the bonus content in terms of what we have, what the randomizer chooses for us, what supporters pick for us to watch. It's good times over there.
Yeah, if you're listening and saying, man, I really wish these guys would review some show that was important to you or some show that you think would be funny for us to watch, you can do that. Same Patreon, patreon.com/wrestling at random. There's another tier where you can be the randomizer. You can choose a show for us to watch. We review it. Then you bump yourself back down to the bonus $5 a month tier, and you can enjoy all the bonus content, including the episode that you requested for us to listen. So yeah, go check out all that information again, patreon.com/wrestling at random, or subscribe directly in your Apple Podcast feed. And coming soon, there'll be other ways to subscribe, so keep a lookout for that. The best way to stay up to date on this podcast and all the happenings and interacting with the show is via Twitter at Wrestle at Random. Give us a follow there. Same thing for Instagram. Facebook.com/wrestling at random works as well. If you stay off social media, I can't blame you. You can send us an email then, wrestlingatrandom@gmail.com. And and we also have a YouTube, Wrestling at Random podcast on YouTube. Find the channel there.
A vibrant community of listeners, hundreds of subscribers over on YouTube, which I think we've maybe 3 times in the 3 seasons of this podcast have we ever mentioned that the show is on YouTube.
Totally organic.
We've never posted about the YouTube channel on our other social media accounts, and somehow that is a thriving community over there.
No, and the majority of the backlog is all audio content only. So it's a way to consume the podcast through YouTube as well. So that's all the ways to get a hold of the show. We love interacting with you. We love hearing all about it. And please give us a follow there. Give us a review on your podcatcher of choice as well. Those 5 stars help us work the algorithm so other wrestling fans can find us. And wrestling fans know wrestling fans. So please tell your wrestling fan friends about the show. Tell your friends that used to be wrestling fans about the show. Maybe they'll take a trip down memory lane with us as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know. I can't think of anything fun to say as far as friends. Who was a friend on the show? Let's say that you and another friend were fake Russians. You weren't quite brothers, but you were tag team partners. One of you was much more impressive, much better at your job than the other. And then as time went by and the Soviet Union broke up and you guys had just drifted apart, maybe this show in the description of Crusher Khrushchev and Nikita Koloff can bring you back together. You never know.
And with that, we're going to call it a podcast. We're going to wrap it up. Adam, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Jeremy. This was a good time. I hope we get another Mid-Atlantic episode. I hope it has less or maybe more Manny Fernandez.
I want to thank everyone for listening, and we'll talk to you again next time.